Hi, I'm Krista Strahan from the National Geographic Society, and I'd like to welcome everyone watching to the 30th anniversary of the Environmental Film Festival in the nation's capital. I'm here with the team behind the Saving the Florida Wildlife Corridor film to talk more about what went into the campaign and the film itself. So let's start off with introductions. Tori, why don't you start introducing yourself?
Hi, Krista. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I am the managing director of Path of the Panther. I'm a full-time conservationist and media producer and served as the impact producer on this film.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. And Benny?
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Krista. Benny Blanco. I'm a fishing guide in Everglades and Biscayne National Parks in South Florida. And I'm a full-time advocate, unfortunately, on every waking minute. And I'm very grateful to have being able to tell the story of my daughters and I and our plight here in the Everglades.
Thank you for joining us. Danny?
Yeah, I'm Danny Schmidt. It's awesome to be here virtually at the film festival. I'm a filmmaker based in Salt Lake City, and I had the pleasure of directing and producing this film with National Geographic and a whole team of very talented folks.
Wonderful. And Dustin?
Thanks, Krista. Excited to talk this film with you guys. I am Dustin Sylvia. I'm a producer for the Impact Media Labs team over at National Geographic Society. And my role in this film was producer and editor.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to hop right into questions. And Tori, I'll start with you. What motivated the production of this film?
When we first embarked on this film I think we started pre-production in December 2019 or January 2020, our team at Path of the Panther had been working to tell the story of the recovery of the Florida panther for about 3 years with generous support from the National Geographic Society. We realized we had a unique opportunity to expand beyond the lens of the impact of conserving lands for wildlife to really talk about what the Florida Wildlife Corridor, what land conservation in this state means for the people who call this landscape home, but also for our economy. As highlighted in the film, the Florida Wildlife Corridor is indispensable for agriculture, tourism, a variety of industries that drive our state.
That's fantastic. And Benny, you devote a significant amount of your time to the protection of the Florida environment. What inspired you to become a conservationist?
Well, Krista, I'm a fishing guide. I watch water all day, every day. I've done so for 24 years. I built my life around it. I feed my family. My daughters, I have one in college and two in high school, and they fully support them on the health of the water. And in 2015, we had a major event where we lost 50,000 acres of seagrass in Florida Bay. And very quickly, I realized that I needed to speak up. And if I didn't speak up, no one would. And as I became more into the world of advocacy, I realized that the health of the water is extremely interconnected with the health of land inland, and how important it was to preserve what we have left of wild spaces so that the wild places we have left are healthy. And unfortunately, the more I get into it, the more I want to be involved. And there has to be there's a balance between when I can actually work and when I can advocate. But I really would love to be an advocate all the time.
And we saw that passion through this film, which was amazing. Danny, what was your major takeaway from spending time with these characters during the production? And you were working with such a wide variety of people. There's tree farmers, clam farmers, an Everglades guide, the rancher. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it wasn't my first time working in Florida on these conservation issues, so I kind of had an idea of the array of characters that all share a similar passion for wild Florida. And I think I had already seen that, my version of Florida in a place that's super wild and a place with lots of wilderness worth protecting, and places that exist in Florida that are outside of what people normally think about. I had that going into it, and so spending the 3 weeks or 4 weeks that we did making this film and meeting all of these characters, I realized that there was a synthesis between everyone that was really, really clear, regardless of political affiliation or location in Florida or what economy you're part of. Everybody was on the same page, and everybody stood to gain a lot by the protection of these wild places in this corridor. And the characters made it easy. You know, they allowed us into their lives for this period of time to film with them, and they opened their hearts and their minds to us, and they made our jobs easy. And obviously Florida's beautiful, and the places that they work and live are really gorgeous. And so, yeah, it was really my pleasure. I felt like I was privy to a really cool world there.
That's fantastic. And so, Dustin, now you have this amazing content. What are some of the challenges and exciting parts of weaving this story together?
Yeah. So as an editor, I mean, that's kind of one of the most exciting parts of that role is you get all this, like you said, beautiful content that Danny filmed, and even the map assets and everything that Carlton and Tori sent us. We had all these great characters like Benny to work with, and the biggest challenge out of the gate was like, okay, in 30 minutes, what is the best way to tell these stories of all these different characters that are all so important to what the message we're trying to tell. And so, you know, normally as a storyteller, I usually do less characters and spend more time focusing on just one or two stories, because 30 minutes is such a short amount of time to convey all this. And what was so unique about this project, and a challenging, but also really rewarding, I thought, was working directly with Tori and Carlton and having them basically fight back with us and be like, no, we need to include every single character we filmed with. We need to hear all their stories equally. They all represent, like Danny said, all these different locations, all these different.
That would have been a very long film.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we normally I would say, wow, this is great, but this is like a feature-length documentary, like is what I'm hearing. But we were able to kind of decide on having, instead of one kind of interweaving story, kind of weaving between the different characters' voices, kind of setting on these 5-minute vignettes and kind of glimpses into their everyday life and just hearing their stories and really focusing on what they had to say one at a time. And I think having Carlton kind of introduce and outro the film and kind of tie all the themes together was a really effective way to deliver all of these varying messages, but then tie it back at the end in one greater theme. And I think that really conveyed, especially to the politicians who are viewing this film, the message that we were trying to tell, and it hit a lot of the chords that resonated with them.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And so, Tori, let's take a step back for a second. How did you go about selecting the locations and casting your characters for this?
I think Dustin really hit home that we gave him quite a challenge with this length of time and this many characters, but it was for a good reason. When we set out to make this film, we did so with the goal of every Floridian seeing themselves in some capacity in these characters, whether they called Pensacola on the far reaches of the Panhandle home or Central Florida. We also wanted to represent a wide variety of industries. So as I mentioned earlier, agriculture and tourism are two of the leading drivers of Florida's economy. Agriculture represents $7.4 billion. Fishing alone, Benny's industry is somewhere around $5 billion, last I checked. And so it was essential to us to find a way to highlight characters with really compelling stories who are dedicated to their home waters and lands, but also playing a really critical role in our economy and kind of that connection between people and nature. And I have to say, we could not have gotten luckier with our cast, who fared with us through a wide variety of circumstances. I don't think I've ever met more generous people in my life. But I will say, when we first shared this film in Tallahassee last spring, it was incredibly compelling and exciting to see Floridians sharing in their own voices versus us telling why protecting the Florida Wildlife Corridor is so essential to the future of this state.
That's amazing. Yeah, and you definitely feel as though they're speaking from their heart. They're speaking from their own experience. Now, Danny, what is it about the film medium specifically that makes it an effective way to engage with your target audience?
Oh man, well, film is just, it's the best at conveying emotion. You get to combine so many different elements. The look on somebody's face with the right music cue and the right sound bite and the right location. It's just, for me, there's not a better medium aside from being there yourself to really convey that to an audience. And so, we as filmmakers in the documentary space, we're always sort of balancing, leaning towards information and emotion. And we try to stray towards emotion because that's what really moves the needle forward, especially on conservation issues. So yeah, I mean, it's the reason that I love film and love to work in film, because, I feel it too. I feel it when I'm filming something, and I feel it when I'm watching something that Dustin edits, and I feel it when I'm, watching another documentary that's great. And we keep coming back to these film festivals and to these movies because they make us feel something.
Yeah, and that's so important, especially doing this work. Benny, a question for you. Have you seen a shift in your industry's value of conservation over the last decade?
Without a doubt. Every fisherman's become a conservationist. Every outdoorsman in the state of Florida has become a conservationist because the places that we love, that we've connected to from the day we were born, are at risk. And whether it's water or woods, if we're not speaking up for it, we're losing it. And so there's a huge cultural shift, not just in the state of Florida, in the country, within our industry, where we are rallying together to speak as one voice in legislature, whether it's local or state or in Washington, D.C. And we're doing that more and more often. And the more often we do that, the more people that get engaged. And the awesome part about advocacy is that it's super contagious. You go one time, or you just talk to somebody who was there one time, and all of a sudden you want to go and speak up. And when you do one time, that's it. You're an advocate for the rest of your life, and every opportunity you jump. And that momentum is just gaining and gaining, and the industry is absolutely changing.
Yeah, and I have to believe that you, being an expert in that industry and knowing that industry, your perspective is so valuable when you are in those spaces and having to speak up for issues like this. So that's,
yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
The reality is, I say this all the time, so I apologize for repeating myself, but passion can't be bought or faked. And so the most authentic presentation to any legislature, any senator, congressman, house rep, is someone who is on the water, who lives on the water, who makes their living on the water, or in the woods, or on a farm, or on an oyster farm, or wherever it may be. That the voices of those people are as authentic as it gets.
right.
And you can't ever argue against it, because it's true passion, it's true authenticity, and it's as good as it gets.
It's firsthand experience. Yeah. Dustin, why do you think it's important to tell, in this instance, an optimistic story about the environment rather than doom and gloom?
Yeah, so I like to say that there's nothing more paralyzing than the feeling of hopelessness. And paralyzation is kind of the opposite of our goal at Nat Geo. So we want to mobilize people. We want to get people to care and to want to take action and do the next step. And so there's plenty of documentaries that focus on showing people and opening their eyes to how horrible things are in the world, or how bad a specific issue has gotten. And yes, we like to introduce the problem in our films like this one, but we don't linger on it. We move right into, okay, what can we do about it? Who are the people that are doing something about it and making things better and making change? And so we want to have people, the audience, leave the film feeling empowered, not feeling hopeless, not feeling like, oh, well, the earth is too far gone. What can I do? Like, what little thing can I do that's going to actually have an effect? And every little thing helps. And so we want people to leave feeling like, okay, well, I can at least do this little thing, and to at least move the needle a little bit towards a positive direction. And so for this film, we do show very graphically like how bad the development growth is getting and how it's affecting the environment and the economy. But then we quickly show from all these voices like ways to solve that and how they're helping it on a very smaller level, and how it all adds up to a greater change. And so that's what we want people to leave with. We want them to feel like it's not hopeless. Everybody can help, big or small, and these are just a few ways that we're trying to show how it can be done.
And speaking of greater change and positive direction, Tori, this film has already had success. How can this campaign act as a model for the idea of creating wildlife corridors, especially in other states?
Yes, well, I'm really excited to share that in the spring of 2021, the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act was passed with bipartisan, unanimous support. That happened in part thanks to this film, but also thanks to the decades of hard work by conservationists, by map makers, by scientists across the state, and ultimately because of hardworking people, my true conservation heroes like Benny, who give of their time daily, weekly, to advocate for these places because they believe in a better future for our state, for our planet as a whole. And so as we step back and we look at this, there's a real, Florida is facing exceptional challenges, right? We're home to 21.5 million people. We're the third most populous state in the nation. We're gaining 1,000 residents a day. We're losing somewhere around 12 acres an hour to development. That's an enormous amount of pressure, but we are not alone in that. States across the nation need wildlife corridors for the migration of their wildlife today, but also in the face of a changing climate. It's our best way to ensure resilience. I am really happy to share that so far 9 states have passed different forms of wildlife corridor legislation, but the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act was really the most substantial to date. And we're excited to begin the process of helping other states share their stories, develop their advocates, and pass similar legislation. I will also note that there is a National Wildlife Corridors Act that has not yet passed, but it is sponsored by Representative Vern Buchanan. It's actually from Southwest Florida. So we're following that closely. But I guess, just to kind of wrap that up, I think the really important message to take away from this, from my experience, is that we all have a role to play in protecting our own backyard. It's easy to look at, frankly, National Geographic documentaries and think about getting involved in conservation a world away, whether that be in the Amazonian rainforest or the Sahel. But there is so much for each and every one of us to do in our own cities, in our own counties, in our own states.
Yeah, and what came up in the film a number of times by a lot of the characters and people involved in the film was this idea of being a steward, right? And how everyone in their own particular ways can be a steward of this land. So more important work to be done, as you mentioned.
Yeah, a responsibility for and a connection to home.
Right. Benny, what makes you optimistic for the future of Florida's green spaces?
That cultural change that we spoke of earlier is I mean, if you need to draw hope for anything, it's that the community in general is realizing that we are the stewards. We're the ones responsible for speaking up for these places. And the really awesome thing that's come from it is it's crossing genres and county lines and state lines. And we've really become one community of advocates, of conservationists, of outdoorsmen. Again, whether in the woods or in the water, we're all fighting for the same thing. We all love the soul of the place that we love. And whether you're fighting from the top end or the bottom end, we're fighting for the same thing. And so as that culture continues to change, as more outdoorsmen realize that responsibility, then our voice becomes that much stronger. And so I draw massive hope and optimism from just that.
Yeah, that singular mission kind of that unites us. That's important. Danny, you filmed this in August 2020, I believe, during the height of the pandemic. Can you tell us a bit about the production? Any memorable points during all of this?
Wow, yeah, there are a lot of memorable points, and I hope that
Benny and I both laughing uncontrollably, thinking of melting in the
categorize it as memorable.
Yeah.
That's an interesting term for it.
I hope the national car rental agencies aren't watching this Zoom. I'm just kidding. Yeah, COVID was a challenge. It was a challenge for all productions across the board. It was really serious we were in the height of the pandemic when we came to film there, and we had a responsibility to our funders and to National Geographic and to each other to take it seriously. And so what our plan was to go on a good old fashioned RV road trip. And so we rented the biggest RV we could find, which was like a bus basically. And we all moved into it. And it was just a big family vacation. And we drove north to south across the state and dealt with all sorts of interesting parking situations and toilet situations and gear situations. And we managed to get every single one of our production vehicles, including the RV, royally stuck to the point of needing to be towed. Florida in the summertime is notoriously wet and muddy and swampy. And but we kind of knew going into it that it was going to be a challenge and that we were going to have to sort of all make this thing work. And we persevered and we had fun because we got to, change locations every 4 or 5 days and go fishing with Benny or go hang out with Lynetta and in the woods. And it was a challenge, but everybody that was on the crew were great professionals and easy to get along with, which is the right combination for working in documentary film.
There's nothing like a road trip. There's nothing like it. The stories I'm sure you come away with. Some you can tell on recorded panel and some you can't, which is always great.
Absolutely.
I'm clearly laughing uncontrollably over here. But if you want to think about maybe a torturous family vacation, it is an RV in August in hurricane season in Florida.
Yeah.
It was wonderful though.
That's amazing. Dustin, last question to you. This film was a production of National Geographic's Impact Media Labs. Can you tell us more about your mission?
Sure. So the Impact Media Labs is our little group. It's only about 12 of us. And we basically work hand in hand with National Geographic Society's grantees and the initiatives that they run. And basically, this film is actually a great example of what we do, in that we started working with Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation and Path of the Panther right from the outset, and worked with them while we were developing the film, and Danny as well. And it's kind of a big collaborative effort where our goal is to basically, our mission is to illuminate these stories of our grantees and the initiatives, and then produce content that has measurable impact. And that's kind of the key difference between just making a film about the Florida Wildlife Corridor and then just putting it on YouTube and seeing what happens. The measurable impact is the important part. And so we worked with Danny and Tori and Carlton And everyone from the outset, knowing our audience very specifically, Tori and Carlton knew their audience very, very well, and that made it very easy to give them edits, and they would give us feedback like, no, we need to add this person, we need to have this person say this, like, and it worked. Obviously, it had the results that we can measure, which are that the bill was passed, the legislation was passed. And so going forward, yeah, we just hope to continue working with explorers and grantees and all these amazing initiatives that they're part of to make content, whether it's film or photography or podcasts, VR, whatever media helps them achieve their impact goals. And so that's kind of our mission going forward. And we think the Florida Wildlife Corridor was a fantastic model of what we can achieve when we work hand in hand with these people.
Well, that's fantastic. And obviously this is an amazing example of that collaboration. Before we close, any thoughts?
I will just add, if anyone's curious to learn more or stay up to date on the cause, please follow us at Path of the Panther, our partners at Florida Wildlife Corridor, FL_Wild Corridor. And of course, Captain Benny Blanco, he's probably my favorite person to follow on Instagram.
Can I ask Benny one more question?
Absolutely.
What is do you have like any crazy stories out there fishing on the Everglades that you could tell us?
Oh, tons of crazy stories. We saw, not recently actually, last year we saw an alligator eating a shark on the shoreline. We were in a creek fishing for tarpon, and an alligator was eating a shark. Apparently, the sharks swim really shallow sometimes in those back creeks because the water's weird. It's mostly fresh, and they're not used to fresh, and so they're on that line between saltwater and fresh. The shark was eating, an alligator was eating a shark. On the other shoreline was a bobcat watching the alligator eat the shark. I don't know how you can get more crazy than that.
If that doesn't impact your tourism industry, I don't know, Benny. That's the most amazing.
I mean, that's how wild the Everglades is, and we were
Wow.
only probably 25 miles in, and you can go, 80
Wow.
miles in, and it's wild. Those are untouched, animals that don't see people. So
Wow.
the alligator was obviously comfortable with us being right there, and the bobcat didn't care whether we were there or not. He was trying to figure out how to get to the shark. So it's pretty cool.
So cool.
Wow. Well, thank you all for being here. This film has already had such amazing impact. So congratulations on its success so far. And I wish it continued success. And of course, ultimately, the protection of the Florida Wildlife Corridor. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Krista.
so much.
Thank you, Krista.
Great to see everybody.
Take care.
Bye.